All right, so I've got something different for you today as a podcast bonus, and we're going to deviate from regular programming for just a little bit. And the reason being is because I am on a jet plane. As you hear this on the podcast, I am crossing the ocean, heading to the land of the rising sun. Yes, I'm on my way to Japan, and I can't tell you what I'm doing there. That's classified. But what I can tell you is that it may involve some rusty Toyotas. That's for sure. So anyway, if you want to follow along with what I'm doing, it's going to be a lot of fun. You can follow my personal Instagram at Sir Matt West. You can follow the show page, facebook.com/automotiveadhd. But in my absence, I have prepared a couple of things. And firstly, next week, Jim Miller, Just a Guy, he is going to be guest hosting the show for me, along with my radio producer, James Fiddler, and they are going to try not to burn down the radio station or incur any additional fines to the FCC. I can't make any promises, and I won't be there to stop them, so you will want to tune into that. That should be a lot of fun. And also, for this bonus edition right here, right now, this is going to be a fun show that I did on Drive Time News Radio in Colorado Springs. See, radio station management, they had a lapse in judgment. I don't know what they were thinking, albeit it was a brief lapse in judgment. But by the time I was done, the damage had been done. They couldn't do anything about it. And they trusted me with the Drive Time News Talk show for an entire hour in place of the regular host, Haim Goldman. And he told me before he left that day that I had a couple requirements. He said, I want you to talk about the media landscape as a whole, and also don't talk about cars. Whatever you do, don't talk about cars on my show. So, of course, I invited automotive YouTuber Wesley Kagan onto the show, where we definitely did not talk about cars on the show. So we're going to get to that. I also had Tori Ganal from Rocky Mountain Voice. She heads that up along with Heidi Ganal, and that's an independent news organization right here in the Rocky Mountain region. So having said that, this is a little different than the automotive stuff you're used to, but trust me, the automotive stuff is going to keep coming. So, as Jim likes to say, hey, if this isn't your shot of whiskey, that's fine. There's more car stuff on the way. But if you want to tune into Drive Time News Talk with this guy at the helm, well, here you go.
We're gonna rock this town, rock it inside out. We're gonna rock this town, make them scream and shout. Let's rock, rock, rock and rock. We're gonna rock till we pop, we're gonna rock till we drop. We're gonna rock this town, rock it inside out.
Welcome into the Peak News. I'm your guest host, Matt West. Do you think that Haim washes that horn thing, that shofar, that's what it's called, the shofar? Do you think he washes it with all the guest hosts here using it and borrowing it? I don't know. But hey, thank you for joining us right here on the Peak News. I have a very exciting show for you today. Haim is out. I have no idea what he's doing. Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe he's on vacation. Maybe he's actually, realistically, what he's probably doing is more work. That guy does need to actually take a real vacation, by the way. But I've got an exciting show for you today because we are going to talk all about media. And coming up here in the next segment, I'm going to have Tori Ganal from Rocky Mountain Voice joining me to talk about having a media voice that represents the people right here in the Pikes Peak region. We're going to talk about non-traditional media as well. And then in the second half of the show, after the bottom of the hour, I have YouTuber Wesley Kagan joining me on the show. He has over 250,000 YouTube subscribers, and he's going to talk about what it takes to be an actual YouTuber, because I know maybe you've got a kid, a nephew, and they say that, oh, my dream job is I want to be a YouTuber. Well, we're going to see, is it all it cracked up to be? Is it really a fun job? And importantly, how do you actually make any money doing it? Yeah, that's an important thing. Money is an important part of media, and we don't always like to talk about that, but we're going to get to that and more on this edition of the Peak News. And to give you some of my background, I've been working in radio, broadcasting as a career now for going on 10 years. I'm a total media nerd. I'm also a recovering car guy. Actually, there's not much recovering that's happening, but I do host a car show on this very station every Saturday at 9 a.m., and it's a ton of fun. We have probably poor financial decisions are really what happens there the most. But, I've had a great opportunity to really learn about the media industry, coming into it from a professional media background. I went to school for broadcasting. I went to the radio and television program at Pikes Peak Community College, and I guess it's Pikes Peak State College now, and got my feet wet there. And then I got somehow, for some reason, I was offered an overnight position. My starting gig in radio was doing overnights on classic rock station 98.1 KKFM. And from there, I've worked in news. I've worked in various forms of radio. I own a media business outside of radio. It's a production company that does everything from TV ads to professional high-level podcasting. We've done podcasts with Vice President Mike Pence, Speaker Mike Johnson, and we travel for a lot of that. So my work really allows me to get a big perspective, a big picture perspective on the media industry as a whole. And I think, and this whole show is going to be a little bit of commentary on media, and especially where media is going and why that's so important, why we should care. Yes, you're just driving home right now, listening on the radio, and we're going to talk about a little bit of media inside baseball. And I think it's really important to talk about because media is how we get our news. Media is how we get entertainment. It's everything in this connected world is basically media now in the 21st century. And and that provides for some interesting opportunities because traditional media, your radio, television, print, really, I think, in my editorial opinion, opinions are that of the host, traditional media is not doing a good job keeping up with what I call non-traditional media, your YouTubers, your Instagram people, your TikTokers, all of this stuff. Traditional media is not doing a good job with that. And they are shooting themselves in the foot, especially with corporate radio. Now, yes, I know we exist in corporate radio here on The Answer, but Salem is one of the few good corporate radio companies, in my opinion, and I've worked for others. So, traditional media, I think, has a big flaw, and we're going to highlight some of that, but we're also going to highlight where that landscape is changing, and importantly, why you should care. And then, of course, we're going to have a little bit of fun at the end of the program. We're going to hear from Jim Miller, just a guy with the Peak Rant. So this is an exciting edition of the show. I'm really looking forward to it. Now, I also want to tell you to patronize our sponsors of the show, Springs Dentists and Dr. Craig Summer, Holistic Dentistry in Colorado Springs. Please patronize the sponsors. The sponsors are how we keep this show on the air. It's how we keep the lights on. I know it's cliche to say that, but it really is. So support local news, support local journalism, and you can do that by supporting the local sponsors. So, hey, don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with the Peak News. Tori Ganal is going to join me right after this break.
Well, I could have been an actor, but I wound up here. I just have to look good, I don't have to be clear. Come and whisper in my ear, give us dirty laundry. Kick 'em with the up, kick 'em with the down, kick 'em with the up, kick 'em with the down.
And we're back here on the Peak News, AM 1460 and FM 101.1, The Answer, covering the entire Pikes Peak region and then some. I'm your guest host, Matt West, and we are going to talk about the news. We're going to talk about maybe some dirty laundry in the news. I know that joke's maybe been a little overplayed now, but we're going to get to that. And joining me over the phone is Tori Ganal from Rocky Mountain Voice. And I love what Rocky Mountain Voice is doing. Sort of the theme of this entire show today is media and comparing and contrasting traditional media to non-traditional media. Later on in the show, we're going to have Wesley Kagan joining me as well to talk about what it's like to be a YouTuber with over 250,000 subscribers and the business aspect of that. So you can really get some inside baseball into what actually happens on the business end there. But first, I want to welcome my guest, Tori Ganal, welcome to the Peak News.
Thank you, Matt. I'm so excited to be here and talk about what we're doing with Rocky Mountain Voice.
And I think Rocky Mountain Voice is really doing some amazing stuff because you are squarely, coming into this media world really in the non-traditional media sense, which is so strong now. I mean, we saw that with the presidential election a few months back, how important online media, non-traditional media, as I'm calling it, really is in 2025. But Tori, real quick, before we get into that, and we're going to get into some headlines as well, give me a little bit of your background, and then let's talk about RMV.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, ironically enough, I did start out in traditional media. I got my broadcast journalism degree from University of Oregon. But I have been in and out of politics really since college. And I was one of the very first Turning Point kids that Charlie ran for student body government at Oregon's campus. I then decided to go off and do my thing, but came back to Colorado when my mom was running for governor and worked on her team as head of social media. And then, after the election, we realized one of the biggest things that was missing from that 2022 election was coverage of the right. And there was just this huge gap. And every time Heidi would talk to the media, it would be this attack. The headlines would be different than the interview. It was just so frustrating. We felt like we couldn't get our message out consistently. So Heidi's next big thing was Rocky Mountain Voice, and we've built it from the ground up. We're almost on year 2 now. And basically, it's your unabashedly right of center news source here in Colorado. We cover a little bit of national news too, but the goal of what we're doing is to give citizens a voice in the media. So we're citizen-led journalism. We have reporters and journalists all over the state that are telling us what's going on behind the scenes that is not getting covered in the traditional media. And to be honest with you, like you were saying, not many people are watching the news these days either. So how we've expanded that is we now have a podcast where we do a 3-minute rundown of the news. We have your Mountain Minute newsletter, which we send out every day, which is a 5-minute rundown of your news. And then we do an even smaller 60 to 90-second rundown on social media, which those clips have just been blowing up. I think people are really craving this, like you said, new media. So it's been really great. And we've loved just building community with conservatives across the state.
I love that. And you really are connecting with people, too, in a generation that is not getting their media from places other than, TikTok and Instagram Reels. Like, we know as media people that is where the next generation gets their news from. They're not turning on Fox News. They're not reading the paper. They're turning to these short form video platforms, this social media, and especially on the right, especially with conservative values, the right hasn't been messaging there really at all, at least until I would say really hasn't gotten big there until the past couple of years. And there's still a drought of really good content there that promotes good ideals and a conservative worldview. And it's just not there aside from what, Rocky Mountain Voice is doing and now what Charlie Kirk has been doing. You mentioned him with Turning Point. And of course, folks can catch Charlie on this station, by the way, every morning at 10 a.m. But Tori, tell me a little bit about some of the headlines we've got here in the news. And, being able to cover this on the state level as well, I think is really cool because we don't see a lot of outlets doing that either, aside from your local TV news affiliates. But what do we have in the headlines right now?
Well, as you know, legislative session wrapped up last week, and it was the most radical session yet, in my opinion. Just the most ideologically aggressive session that I've seen. Democrats pushed through sweeping laws like SB 2503. That was a permit to purchase law that required Coloradans to take state-sanctioned firearm training, and that is already signed into law by Polis. We've got HB 251312, the Kelly Loving Act, and that expands the anti-discrimination protections for transgender people in schools and courtrooms that could cost parents custody in the courtroom of their kids if they misgender their kids. Really horrible. That has not been signed into law yet, but I would highly doubt Polis would do anything to keep that from going in. Another big one, which I wanted to touch on today, was SB 276. And this limits cooperation with ICE and further cements Colorado's status as a sanctuary state. And a lot of counties, like Teller County, is they're coming out against this law and saying, hey, Pam Bondi, this is a constitutional violation, and we do not stand for this happening in our state, and we want you to come against this. And they are on the national level, but it's been quite the battle here on the ground with these immigration laws going into effect, and Colorado is standing pretty firm that they're going to stay a sanctuary state, which is really, really surprising. So I think those are some of the biggest bills that we've seen pass through. One of the biggest battles, like I said, is immigration. There's definitely a ton going on the school front. Down in Pueblo in D70, there's a huge social emotional learning scandal that I can get into, a $700,000 in-kind gift from an NGO that's quietly implementing these SEL curriculums inside the school.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot, and the biggest thing I see in the comments on social media are like, gosh, this is so depressing. How did Colorado get this bad? But I do think that people need to see how bad it's gotten in order for there to be change. So yeah, I'm happy to go into more detail on any of those, Matt, but that's kind of a preview and a sneak peek into what's happening on the headline front for Rocky Mountain Voice.
Well, and I think what's incredible is the way that as media and especially as independent journalists, and you mentioned that there's, I think, a lot of alignment of values, especially between the Peak News and Rocky Mountain Voice, especially when it comes to involving independent journalists and really giving people a voice to highlight these things. I mean, what we're doing in the media is putting a spotlight on these issues. And sure, you've got everything from the news side of it to the commentary side of the media. And those are different parts, but they both equally put this spotlight on things that are happening. And through the internet, through the technological means that we have, it's not just a guy with a microphone like me right here going over the radio. I mean, it's everywhere and it's accessible. Have you really seen a positive reaction to that now that you've really been, able to at least shine a light on all of these things going on? Has there been a positive reaction either in the rest of the media, or have we seen change in some of these bills? What have you seen?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, HB 251312 was a huge example of that. Because of the media pushback specifically, I think largely due to Rocky Mountain Voice, some of the other parent groups that were going up against the bill, like CPAN and Grandparents for Kids, we saw the bill just completely stripped of a lot of the substance that was, unconstitutional and a violation of our rights. So, it's still there, and it still has the same intent, but it's not as strong. And one of the things that got stripped away from it was that the media could have been held liable if they misgendered someone. So that was taken out, thank goodness, because as a media organization, I really could not see that successfully moving forward. So yeah, we've seen success for sure.
I love that. That means that this is working and that this is the direction we need to keep going in with the media. My guest is Tori Ganal from Rocky Mountain Voice. Look him up, rockymountainvoice.com for more info. We will be back in just a minute right here on the Peak News. Welcome back to the Peak News, AM 1460 and FM 101.1, The Answer. Remember, you can also stream this show online. AM 1460, theanswer.com is the website. You can also check out the Peak News. See the entire repository of all of the previous shows on video. Check it out on Facebook and YouTube. Look up the Peak News there. I'm your guest host, Matt West. And joining me again over the phone is Tori Ganal. We were actually talking in the break, and we said, hey, we got some more stuff we got to talk about. So, Tori, thanks for hanging through the break with me.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
Now, if you're just joining us, Tori Ganal, she works with Rocky Mountain Voice. And Rocky Mountain Voice is such an incredible organization because they are really giving a voice to people right here in the Rocky Mountain region. It's interesting. It's kind of like the name kind of flows with that, right?
It's like it was supposed to be that way.
I love it. I love it. And so, Tori, with Rocky Mountain Voice, really, you're doing some incredible stuff. And you were telling me during the break that one of the really positive things we've seen is a lot of growth even with Rocky Mountain Voice and being able to reach people and really shine a light on all of these topics and issues.
Yes, I think what we were talking about a little bit was the short form contact,
Yes.
where people are consuming smaller bits of information on social media or a podcast. And we've seen this completely boom in the last month specifically, I think mostly because of legislative session, but also because we've started posting these daily news clips to social media. And we have grown over 10,000 followers just on Instagram in the last month due to these short form clips. And not to mention, our newsletter has already almost 250,000 subscribers. It's just seen a huge boom in the last year. And I think that's because people are really craving this information and want their news directly from the source, which is the citizens across the state that align with their values. I think we were talking about that in the first segment as well, as people want news from people that they trust and that their values align with as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, 10,000 extra followers on Instagram in 1 month, by the way, that's incredible growth. And the thing with social media and online stuff is that also snowballs too. I mean, it starts growing exponentially. And as we'll talk with my guest, Wesley Kagan, coming up here after the bottom of the hour, he'll talk a little bit about the YouTube algorithm and how to leverage that and really grow your content, how that helps people find what you're doing. Now, Tori, since you also came from a traditional media background, and now you are really doing some amazing work with Rocky Mountain Voice and really taking that off in the non-traditional space, I kind of want to get your 2 cents, your take on the media landscape as a whole. I mean, how have you seen it change, and where do you think it's going from here?
People want more news. They're confused by what's happening, but they want it straight from the source, and they want it to be crystal clear. I think we've seen that with podcasts like Joe Rogan during the election cycle, where people will listen to 3-hour podcasts if it's news and information that they want, especially with a political candidate, where we're not just asking the typical questions that a journalist would ask. I think people are tired of that traditional journalism, the fake scripted questions. People want to get raw and down to the point. And I think that's why we've seen so much success on social media too. It doesn't need to be polished. It doesn't need to be edited. It doesn't need to be pre-planned. People just want it raw, and they just want someone who's authentic delivering it to them. So I think, we're seeing this big shift from TV and radio into podcasts and social media. And it's tough because not everything can be trusted on those platforms, right? So that's what we love about Rocky Mountain Voice. The Peak is actually one of the podcasts that we feature on our platform. We feature all these other aggregated news sources that people can trust beyond just our own original reporting, because it really is important to have a good delivery person that aligns with what you value, for sure.
Well, and especially when a lot of the values in traditional media, and we can think of those traditional media outlets, when we talk about having values align at all, I mean, their values are in many cases lying and cheating and just fraud. I mean, even in the media, we want just the truth. We want it. Sometimes we want it down the middle. We want it as it is. And I think adding an extra voice to that and giving it to the people is so important. Tori, real quick, we're going to take a news break here. Speaking of the news, where else can people find Rocky Mountain Voice online?
RockyMountainVoice.com. Sign up for our Mountain Minute newsletter, as well as just check us out on social media, Rocky Mountain Voice.
He's the nut behind the wheel and behind the mic. This is
The Peak News
with Matt West.
Oh, man. When is Heim going to get some of his own liners for this show? Now, I do a car show on the weekend, so I guess I kind of had to recycle one of the liners there just a little bit. But hey, you are listening to The Peak News. I am your guest host, Matt West, and joining me is a friend of mine. He is a YouTuber with Wesley. What are you at now? 300,000 subscribers? Am I close?
A little bit less than that, but I appreciate the optimism going forward there. Yeah.
I'm rounding
a
up.
little bit less than that. 200 and some odd as of today.
Fantastic. And there is a lot of work that goes into building a YouTube channel, for one. Everyone at this point says, hey, I want to be a YouTuber. Every kid says, hey, I want to be a YouTuber. That's my dream job. And we're going to talk about exactly what that means and what it actually takes to make that a job, because there is a big difference between doing it casually and actually doing it for a living. Now, that said, Wesley, let's talk about some of your background. Now, I've known you for a very long time, but the listeners on this show may not be familiar with you unless they're one of your 280 million subscribers. I'm rounding up again there a little bit.
Yes, exactly. You got it exactly right that time.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, my background right now is actually a little bit complicated. There's a Sheldon lathe from 1953 behind me. Also in my background is a steering wheel I built up there. As far as, how I got started in doing all of this, I think it was 2020. Everybody was in for the pandemic, and I bought a car, and I decided to take that car apart and rebuild a different car. I'm talking about I got inspired by the old Lotus Formula One cars from the era, and I decided to put together my own kind of rendition, truly out of a box of scraps in my garage. And I filmed some of it. I took it to a racetrack, and you actually came over and helped film some of it.
I did, yes.
And I tossed it up on YouTube, and a bunch of people seemed to like me doing dumb things on the internet. So here we are a couple of years later, and what I spend, it's interesting because in one breath you can say my full-time job is YouTube. In another breath, I think, and more accurately, what I spend the most amount of my time on is YouTube. And I also do other things as well. And I think that boils down to a lot of what is actually necessary to make any sort of social media happen is you really, really do have to love what you do. And if I didn't like what I do, I wouldn't do it, because it's difficult, like you said. But yeah, I got started, doing a lot of the just doing something that I was going to do anyways, and then putting it on the internet, and people seem to enjoy it. So.
Yeah, and let's talk about exactly what that is, because YouTube is an avenue for people to do something a little unusual and find a following, and in many ways sustain themselves doing a hobby that otherwise might not pay, or might be a lot harder, at least, to do to make a living doing. Now, I'll use the phrase that people on the internet like to use, content. The videos you do, the topics you do are fascinating. Now, of course, this isn't my regular show on the weekends where I talk about cars, but I promised Chaim that I would not talk about cars at all whatsoever on this program. So, Wesley, what exactly do you do videos of? Because it's not cars, right?
Well, it's the funniest thing. I do videos about cars. I also do videos about engineering occasionally, but mostly I talk about cars. Matthew can attest that we've spent hours sitting there talking about cars, and part of it is, having that knowledge of and again, that desire of wanting to cars. So there's, in the entire YouTube space, there's a lot of different, I think, levels of how detailed of content you can create. Mm-hmm. And I chose, I think, to believe one of the hardest avenues in which it's building things and research and design and actually putting together things from scratch, which has a tremendous amount of overhead financially and a tremendous amount of overhead in just the absolute time sink that sometimes projects that don't even make it to air take. And in a lot of ways, and I want to be clear and not to discourage anyone from this particular line of work or this particular hobby, sometimes doesn't pan out, and sometimes it takes a whole lot of effort to make something that never makes it to air.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. When we talk about making content, people are saying, okay, I want to be a YouTuber, but what do I make videos about? And like you said, it's being passionate about something, right? You have to do something that you can passionately do, presumably without paying the bills for a very long time, nonetheless. But you've taken that a step further, because not only are you making videos, your videos are, again, about cars, about engineering, and I mean, really getting into the nitty gritty of some very cool mechanical engineering concepts. And with all of that, in order to make a video about that, you must also first do those things, which I think people don't understand that time commitment when they follow a favorite YouTuber these days. And they're like, man, this guy hasn't posted a video in, 2 days. I'm unsubscribing. I mean, in your case, you're kind of like a month of video many times, right?
If not a little bit longer. And I and the algorithm both dislike that immensely. But you have to. I attribute it a lot to being incredibly lucky that I live and exist in a time to where I can do dumb things on the internet and get paid for it, because this is what I like to do generally, which is learn about abstract little things and restore old industrial equipment and get really, really passionate about this little thing over here for a little bit. And sometimes it goes back on the shelf until I find another angle on it and stuff like that. No, it's an incredible amount of time, and not only in the actual, like, whatever you're doing, but unless you have somebody there holding the camera, unless you have someone there doing an edit, doing a lot of stuff like that, it takes an incredible amount of work to facilitate the entire social media thing and to facilitate, like, actually the physical process of uploading a video. It takes a whole lot of work. I know people with social media that have 2 full-time social media people that's all they do. And I mean, obviously they're corporations. That's a little bit of a different story, but all of this stuff takes a surprising amount of time. Something I did not even think about going into this.
Well, and to do it at the volume that is necessary to make a living out of it, to make a career out of it, I can absolutely understand that. Here in radio and broadcasting, we have a daily grind. Every single day, we're live on the radio, we're doing something, we're doing social media to go with that. And for us working in this industry, this is quite literally a full-time job. And in many ways, it seems like, well, I'm independent, I'm a YouTuber. That maybe is a full-time job and then some, because you're not just making the content, you're not just filming the content, but it's like you say as well, it's doing the social media. And really that is, I think, one of the toughest things, because of how much engagement and how much volume of social media, I should say, it requires to get a sustainable level of engagement. And is that right?
And always being constantly tempted to go and chase the algorithm in a way that you see content that you think will do well. And so it might not be something you're passionate about, but you do it for the sake of engagement, or you do it for the sake of content. And it something about it really does show. And I think everybody can attest that they'll notice when a content creator just does something that they don't want to do for the sake of content. And I've been incredibly fortunate that I haven't had to do any content that I haven't wanted to do. And that's I see people that I know kind of fall into those trappings sometimes. And it's a struggle, because you want it to succeed and you want to make content, but sometimes you can't, and I think that's okay. The algorithm and a lot of other people don't, but
and so and looking at this too, I mean, when we look at what work it takes to do this in a professional environment, we're looking at a lot of the same thing with YouTube. But I also want to tie into a couple of different questions here that will float over into the next segment. And the first of which is, we've got the YouTube algorithm. People talk about the algorithm. This video did well with the algorithm. I'm going to do this to trick the algorithm. And What are your thoughts on this mythical algorithm? What is it, and why is it relevant to what you do?
I mean, at the end of the day, whether you view it this way or not, like on a very specific level, the algorithm is directly related to how many people see what you do on a day-to-day basis and how many people interact with the content you make. And that, it's complicated, and we could probably do a very, very long time on exactly how the algorithm was developed and like how it interacts and how it curates content for us as consumers. Because I mean, I'm a consumer of content just like everybody else. I spend a lot of time watching other creators that I like on YouTube, and how it funnels certain people.
And Wesley, real quick, I'm going to have you hold that thought
Yeah.
right there. We're going to be back. We're going to talk about how exactly you can leverage the algorithm and how you can maybe even make a living on YouTube. We're going to put the nuts and bolts of that together right here. We'll be back on The Peak. And welcome back to The Peak News right here on AM 1460 and FM 101.1, The Answer. You have tuned into the correct radio station. No, we're not NPR. No, we're not funded by the government. We don't have tote bags to sell you, but we are talking about media. I'm your guest host, Matt West, sitting in for Chaim Goldman, and my guest joining me is Wesley Kagan. If you were tuned in just before the break, you'll know that he is a YouTuber. He is a full-time YouTuber, in fact. This has become a full-time job for him. And we were talking about the algorithm, Wesley, before the break. And let's just wrap up real quick why that algorithm is so important.
Yeah, realistically, the basic thing is you should find a niche that works for you and that other people enjoy watching of yours. Like, again, the passion will come through, and honestly, regardless of the big numbers, regardless of any of that, like, it's so much better to have a tight knit group of people that enjoy the content you make than huge numbers in any sense.
It's steering people towards your content is what it's doing. Yep. But it's also making sure that instead of just sheer numbers, they're quality viewers, in the sense they're people who watch your stuff and enjoy it, instead of, just click on that video and then I'll find something else later. They're passive. They're not engaged. It's steering engaged viewers to you, right?
Exactly. And it's people I want to interact with on a day-to-day basis. It's people that I would want to talk to who have interesting things to say. And that's the best thing for me, is that I actually, I think I make content for people like me, which is a blessing and a curse sometimes. But, I enjoy what I would watch the videos that I make, and that's the nicest thing I can say about them.
Well, and contrasting that to traditional media, for example, here on a radio show, a lot of times people are used to calling in on the radio. They're used to interacting with the show in that way. Online, It's just as interactive, if not more, and it's through the comments, it's through the viewers, it's through the people. It's not just a passive watching experience.
Yeah, completely agree.
Awesome. Now, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I really want to ask about the dollars and cents. People are wondering this. They say, my 12-year-old says he wants to be a YouTuber. Is that a real career? How do you actually take views and turn them into dollars?
Sponsors. And I should clarify that I feel like I have a fairly strong understanding of the correct practices of this particular industry. However, I do not follow the correct practices of this particular industry for my own personal reasons, and for the fact that sometimes I don't do the best practices for anything. And that's, in my mind, totally fine. So at the core, when you sign up for a YouTube channel and when you actually go through the process of becoming quote unquote monetized, which I actually don't know what the requirements are. I believe it's 10,000 views and 1,000 subscribers, or it might have used to been. And you get a percentage of the ad revenue that YouTube or Google would get from a particular mid-roll ad or ad at the beginning or end of a video. So from there, that car content in the past has hovered around $3 RPM, revenue per milli, which is basically $3 per 1,000 views. As a really rough number that depends heavily on the industry, that depends heavily on a lot of different factors, and it changes sometimes. So it really can, it depends is the answer there, which I know is not the answer that everybody's looking for.
So you have obviously YouTube AdSense is what people call it. These are the ads that run on the YouTube videos. A very small portion, albeit of that, goes to the YouTuber, the content creator. The majority of that goes to YouTube, however. Now, the bulk of it, and we only got about 15 seconds here to wrap up, but the bulk of it is sponsors, right? Just like how we do in radio. Is that right?
That would be correct. That's your best bang for your buck, if that's the colloquialism you want to use.
And continuing the theme of comparing YouTube and the internet to traditional media in a weird way, that's very similar. Sponsors are paying for the number of views that you get, the number of subscribers, the number of eyeballs. Right here on radio, it's the same thing. Now, Wesley Kagan is my guest. Wesley, hang with me through the break. Before the break, though, we are going to hear from Jim Miller, just a guy with the peak rants. James, do you know what he's talking about? No? Yeah, me neither. I don't know if Jim knows what he's talking about, but here he is with the peak rants.
I'm Jim Miller. I ran for mayor. I ran for city council. I'm just a guy, and this is the peak rants. So PBS and NPR, huh? They got defunded. They're not going to run that through. There's not everybody, but there's a lot of people grumpy. Look, I can see why. From my era, NPR, PBS, these were like standard education things you just watched on TV where you're like, holy crap, there's a thing. It's telling me where states are. I can learn numbers or colors or what things are, this and that. NPR, kind of unbiased, more moderate kind of news and governmental feedback on things going on, news and things around the world, this and that. It was supposed to be that. But look, let's be honest and realistic. NPR has become a bunch of libby-dibby crap. PBS has become a bunch of garbage trash. It smells of dumpster fire. If there was smell-o-vision, it would smell like a 5-week-old dumpster that's been out in the rain and molded in the sun right after a snowstorm, filled with old cabbages. All right? It's garbage. It's trash. It's a waste of. What does it do? Hey, 2 gay ducks so they can teach this. Oh, I got Triceratops nonsense. Shut up. Get out of the way. Why am I funding this garbage for small children to run and do and everything? This is ridiculous. You can't be doing this. I'm not funding this. I don't want to fund this. I'm not going to fund this. You're not going to fund this. I don't care about Triceratops. There's a reason it went extinct. This is ridiculous. You know what? Good. Goodbye, NPR. Goodbye, PBS. You lost your way, so you lost your funding. Do you know what that means? Do you know what all that transpires to be? You've been dozed. That's right, you're gone. See you. Good riddance, goodbye. I am tired, like most other people, of funding my own oppression and the subjugation and the nonsense crap that gets fed to our children, polluting and corrupting and destroying the next generation. So yeah, you've been dozed. Remember, if you want it better, be better. I'm Jim Miller, I'm just a guy, and this is the Peak Rants on AM 1460 and FM 101.1. The Answer. We'll be right back.
Well, thank you for joining us right here on the Peak News, AM 1460 and FM 101.1 The Answer. I'm your guest host, Matt West. Joining me over the phone still, Wesley Kagan. And Wesley, so we learned all about, what makes YouTube tick in many ways, and also how it's very similar in the dollars and cents realm to traditional broadcasting here. Now, Wesley, how do people follow you? How do they join the 290 trillion followers that you have on YouTube?
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. You can follow me on YouTube at Wesley Kagan. I'm also on Instagram and a few other social medias like that. And yeah, if you like the videos I make, please like, subscribe, comment down below. Buy a tote bag. I actually sell tote bags. You guys need to get in on that game. That's where the big money is. So
big money's the tote bags. That's
big
the
money's the
secret.
tote
So this
bags.
whole interview, you said sponsors and AdSense. No, it's tote bags.
It's actually tote bags. That's the
oh
real
my
trick.
gosh.
Yeah.
Was NPR onto this the whole time?
That being said, I'm a shill for Big Tote. So, there's also that.
Got to watch out. Big Tote. Big Tote is coming for you. So,
Big Tote.
Wesley, thank you for joining me here on the Peak News. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And a tremendous thank you to James Fiddler for running the board. Thank you to Chaim Goldman for letting me keep the seat warm here in the studio. And an apology because I said I would not talk about cars. We did end up talking about cars, but I don't take any of it back. I actually apologize for nothing. So now, of course, you can catch this show Monday through Thursday, 3 to 4 p.m. Coming up after the program here, Larry Elder will be on the air. I get to headline Larry Elder, which is pretty darn cool. But tomorrow, Dirk Hobbs takes over the seat with the Southern Colorado Business Forum and Digest. You don't want to miss that. So, hey, thanks for joining us right here on the Peak News. Tune in to me as well. If you want more of me for some reason, you can do that. You can do that Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. on this station, or you can also like and subscribe. Follow Automotive ADHD podcast on YouTube. Thanks for joining us right here on the Peak. We'll talk to you next week.